She kissed a stranger to save her life. He kissed back to ruin hers. One mistake, one man, one secret that could burn the entire kingdom to ash. This is the story of a girl who hid behind ink and a duke who wore power like armor until the night everything shattered. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Let's begin. The air in Asheville smelled like sulfur and stale perfume. Liora Hale pressed herself against the limestone wall outside the bathhouse, breathing hard, her fingers clenched around the worn leather strap of her satchel. Inside that bag were 3 pamphlets still warm from the press, ink barely dry, words still dangerous. Someone was following her. She'd felt it for 2 blocks now, footsteps that matched hers too closely, a shadow that turned when she turned. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it wanted out. "Steady," she whispered to herself. "You've done this a dozen times. Just move." But tonight felt different. The spa district was alive with noise. Carriages clattered over cobblestone. Laughter spilled from tavern doors. Steam hissed from vents beneath the street, curling upward in ghostly ribbons. Asheville was a town built on hot springs and cold money, a place where the rich came to soak their bones and the poor came to serve them. Liora fit neither category cleanly, which made her dangerous in ways most people didn't understand. She ducked into the crowd near the fountain square, weaving between a group of merchants arguing over wool prices. Her printer's apron was gone, replaced by a simple gray dress that didn't stand out. Smart. Forgettable. But not forgettable enough. "Miss Hale." The voice came from behind her, smooth and low, like oil sliding over glass. She froze. Slowly, she turned. Councilman Garrett Thorne stood 3 feet away, hands clasped behind his back, his smile sharp enough to draw blood. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that never blinked enough. He wore his power the way other men wore cloaks, heavy, obvious, suffocating. "Councilman," Liora said, forcing her voice steady, "I didn't see you there." "I'm sure you didn't." He stepped closer. The crowd around them kept moving, oblivious. No one looked twice at a councilman speaking to a young woman. Why would they? Thorne tilted his head slightly, studying her. "It's late for a walk, isn't it?" "I like the air," she said. "Do you?" It wasn't a question. His gaze flicked to her satchel. "What's in the bag?" "Paper," she said. "I work at my father's print shop." "I know what you do." The way he said it made her skin crawl. Thorne took another step, close enough now that she could smell his cologne, something heavy, cloying, expensive. "There's been talk," he said quietly. "Troubling talk. Pamphlets circulating through the lower quarters, radical ideas, dangerous words." Liora kept her face blank. "I wouldn't know anything about that." "Wouldn't you?" His smile widened. She needed to move, now. But Thorne shifted his weight, blocking her path without seeming to. "You're your father's daughter," he said. "Thomas Hale. Good man, loyal, keeps his head down, prints what he's told to print." He paused. "I'd hate to see his business suffer because of careless associations." There it was. The threat, wrapped in silk. Leora's pulse roared in her ears. She could run, but he'd follow. She could scream, but who would care? Thorne was counsel. She was a printer's daughter with ink still under her fingernails. And then she saw him. A man standing near the fountain, watching. Tall, dark coat, sharp jaw, eyes like winter. He wasn't looking at Thorne. He was looking at her. Liora didn't think. Thinking was what got you killed. She stepped forward, closed the space between her and Thorne, and grabbed the front of his jacket. "What are you—" She kissed him. Not Thorne, the stranger. She'd crossed the distance in 3 strides, satchel swinging, and pressed her mouth against his before her brain could catch up to her body. The man went rigid. His hands came up, not to push her away, but to steady her, fingers firm on her waist. She pulled back just enough to breathe. "Play along," she whispered against his lips. "Please." For a moment, the world stopped. The stranger's eyes were gray, cold, unreadable. Then he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Darling," he said, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. His voice was smooth, controlled, and utterly detached. "You're late." Leora's heart lurched, but she didn't let go. "I got held up." "I can see that." He turned his gaze past her, and Liora felt the air shift. Garrett Thorne stood 5 feet away, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "Councilman," the stranger said, his tone polite and cold as a blade, "I didn't realize you were acquainted with my fiancée." The word hit like a hammer. Fiancé. Leora's breath caught, but she forced herself to stay still, to lean into the lie. Thorne's jaw tightened. "Your fiancé." "Yes." The stranger's hand slid from Leora's waist to her lower back, possessive and deliberate. "Is there a problem?" Thorne's eyes flicked between them, calculating, searching for cracks. "No," he said finally. "No problem." But the look he gave Liora promised otherwise. He stepped back, adjusted his coat, and walked away without another word. The crowd swallowed him whole. Liora didn't move. Couldn't. The stranger's hand stayed where it was. "Let me go," she said quietly. "Not yet." His voice was calm. Too calm. "People are watching," he continued. "If you pull away too fast, it'll look like a lie. And if it looks like a lie, he'll know." He paused. "You're not stupid enough to want that." Leora's hands were still pressed against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, steady, controlled, utterly unbothered. "Who are you?" she asked. "Someone who just saved your life," he said. "You're welcome." "I didn't ask you to." "No," he agreed. "You just kissed me instead." Heat rushed to her face, but she refused to look away. "I needed an out." "You got one." His gaze sharpened. "What did Garrett Thorne want with you?" "None of your business." "It is now." The certainty in his voice unsettled her more than the kiss had. He released her slowly, stepping back just enough to be proper. The crowd moved around them, indifferent, a couple arguing, a drunk singing off-key, life continuing. "You should go home," the stranger said. "I know how to take care of myself." Clearly. The sarcasm was so dry it almost made her laugh. Almost. "Thank you," she said stiffly, "for playing along." He studied her for a long moment, and Liora had the unsettling sense that he was cataloging everything, her face, her dress, the way her fingers still gripped her satchel strap too tightly. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. Giving him her name felt like handing over a weapon, but refusing felt worse. "Liora," she said. "Liora Hale." Something flickered in his expression. Recognition? Maybe. Or something sharper. "Darian Voss," he said. The name hit her like cold water. Duke Voss. The Duke Voss. The man who controlled half the northern territories, who had the ear of the crown, who could destroy a person with a signature. She'd just kissed a man who could end her with a word. "I see you've heard of me," Darian said. Liora forced herself to breathe. "Everyone's heard of you, and yet you chose me as your escape route." He tilted his head slightly. "Bold, reckless, stupid. It worked, didn't it? This time." The weight of those 2 words settled over her like a noose. Darian turned slightly, glancing in the direction Thorne had gone. "Garrett Thorne doesn't let things go," he said quietly. "If he's interested in you, he'll dig. And if he digs, he'll find something. There's nothing to find. Everyone has something to hide." The way he said it made her wonder what he was hiding. "I can handle him," Liora said. Darian looked back at her, and for the first time, something almost like amusement touched his expression. "No," he said. "You can't." Before she could respond, he reached into his coat and pulled out a card, simple, cream-colored, with a single address printed in black ink. He held it out. "If Thorne comes for you again," Darian said, "you'll need help. Real help. Not another desperate kiss." Liora stared at the card but didn't take it. "Why would you help me?" "I didn't say I would." "Then why give me this?" Darian's smile returned, cold and unreadable. "Because I'm curious what you're hiding, Liora Hale, and I don't like Garrett Thorne." He pressed the card into her hand before she could refuse, his fingers brushing hers for just a second. "Go home," he said, before you do something else reckless." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as smoothly as if he'd never been there at all. Liora stood alone by the fountain, her heart still racing, the card burning in her palm. She looked down at it. An address? Nothing more. She should throw it away. Burn it. Forget this ever happened. Instead, she slipped it into her satchel, next to the pamphlets that could get her killed. Schatz, Liora didn't go home. Not right away. She took the long route through the back alleys, checking over her shoulder every few steps, her mind spinning. Thorn knew something. Maybe not everything, but enough to be dangerous. And now Darien Voss, Duke Voss, knew her name. This was bad. This was so bad. By the time she reached the narrow brick building that housed Hale and Son Printing, the street was empty. The windows were dark. Good. Her father would be asleep by now. She unlocked the side door and slipped inside, moving quietly through the cramped workspace. The smell of ink and paper wrapped around her like a second skin. This place was safety, routine, control. Except tonight, it felt like a trap. Liora set her satchel on the workbench and pulled out the pamphlets. 3 copies of her latest work, On the Lies We're Fed and the Chains We Forge Ourselves. Not her best title, but the content was sharp, dangerous. It named names, carefully, cleverly, but enough that anyone paying attention would know who she meant. Corrupt council members, policies designed to keep the poor desperate, systems built to protect power at any cost. She'd written every word by hand, set every letter in the press herself, printed them in the dead of night when her father wasn't around to ask questions. This was her voice, the only one that mattered. But if Thorn found proof, if he connected her to the pamphlets, she didn't let herself finish the thought. Instead, she hid the copies in the false bottom of an old ink barrel, locked the side door, and climbed the narrow stairs to the apartment above the shop. Her father's snoring drifted through the thin walls. Liora stood in the doorway to her tiny room, staring at the bed she was too wired to sleep in. Her mind kept circling back to the kiss, to Darien Voss, to the way he'd looked at her, like he could see straight through every lie she'd ever told. She pulled the card from her satchel and studied it again. Why had he helped her? Men like Darien Voss didn't do things without reason. Every move was calculated, every word a strategy. So what did he want? Liora turned the card over in her fingers, then set it on the windowsill and climbed into bed fully clothed. She didn't sleep. What? Morning came too fast. Liora was already awake when the sun broke over the rooftops, casting pale light through the dusty windows. She dressed quickly, plain blouse, dark skirt, hair pinned back, and went downstairs to start the press. Her father was already in the shop, ink-stained hands moving over the typeset for an order of wedding invitations. Thomas Hale was a quiet man, stocky, graying, with hands that never stopped working and eyes that never asked too many questions. He taught Liora everything he knew about printing, about precision, about keeping your head down and your debts paid. He didn't know what she did with that knowledge after dark. "Morning," he said without looking up. "Morning." Liora moved to the press, checking the rollers, adjusting tension. The work was meditative, familiar. She could lose herself in it if she tried hard enough, but today she couldn't stop thinking. "You were out late last night," her father said. She stiffened. "Couldn't sleep," she said. "Went for a walk." He didn't push. He never did. They worked in silence for the next hour, the rhythmic clunk of the press filling the space between them. Then the door opened. Liora looked up. A young man stepped inside, lean, nervous, with ink-stained fingers and a courier's bag slung over one shoulder. She recognized him. Finn, one of the distributors who helped spread her pamphlets through the lower quarters. He shouldn't be here, not during the day, not with her father present. "Can I help you?" Thomas asked. Finn's eyes flicked to Liora. "I'm looking for Liora Hale." Her stomach dropped. "That's me," she said carefully. Finn reached into his bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This was left at the usual drop," he said quietly, "addressed to you." He handed it over. Liora took it, her pulse quickening. "Thank you," she said. Finn nodded once and left without another word. Thomas frowned. "What was that about?" "Nothing," Liora said. "Just a note from a friend. She turned away before he could ask more, unfolding the paper with hands that wanted to shake. The handwriting was precise, elegant. Miss Hale, I believe we have mutual interests. If you wish to discuss them, meet me at the address I gave you. Tonight, 8 o'clock. Come alone. DV. Liora read it twice. Then she crumpled it in her fist. Darian Voss knew. He knew what she was. And now he was calling her in. But she spent the rest of the day trying to decide whether to go. Every rational part of her brain screamed no. Meeting a duke in private was suicide. He could arrest her, expose her, use her, but he could have done that already. Instead, he'd sent a note, an invitation. Why? By the time the sun set, Liora had made her decision. She told her father she was meeting a friend for dinner. He didn't question it. She took the back streets again, keeping to the shadows. The address from Darian's card burned into her memory. It led her to the north side of Ashevale, where the buildings were taller, cleaner, and the air smelled less like sulfur. The address belonged to a narrow townhouse wedged between two larger estates, unremarkable except for the polished brass knocker on the door. Liora stood on the step for a long moment, her heart hammering. Then she knocked. The door opened immediately. Darian Voss stood in the doorway, dressed in dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. No jacket, no formality. He looked different, less untouchable. You came, he said. You didn't give me much choice. There's always a choice. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. Liora hesitated, then walked in. The interior was simple, clean, a sitting room with 2 chairs and a low table, bookshelves lining one wall, a fire crackling in the hearth, not what she'd expected from a duke. Darian closed the door behind her and moved to the table, where a bottle of wine and 2 glasses waited. Sit, he said. I'd rather stand. Sit anyway. It wasn't a request. Liora sat. Darian poured 2 glasses of wine, handed her one, and took the chair across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Darian set his glass down and leaned back, studying her. You write the pamphlets, he said. It wasn't a question. Leora's grip tightened on her glass. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. I've been tracking the distribution patterns for weeks, he continued, trying to figure out who was behind them. The writing is sharp, informed, dangerous. It took me longer than I'd like to admit to narrow it down. He smiled faintly. But then you kissed me, he said, and I started paying closer attention. Leora's pulse roared in her ears. If you're going to turn me in, she said quietly, just do it. I'm not going to turn you in. Why not? Darian picked up his glass, swirling the wine. Because I've been funding the same cause. The words hung in the air like smoke. Liora stared at him. What? I don't agree with Garrett Thorne's policies, Darian said, or the council's. They're corrupt, short-sighted, dangerous. I've been working to undermine them for months. He paused. Quietly. You're lying. Why would I lie? Because you're a duke, Liora said. You benefit from the system. I benefit from stability, Darian corrected. Not corruption. There's a difference. He set his glass down and leaned forward, his gaze sharp. I don't need you to trust me, he said, but I need you to listen. Thorne is circling, he's suspicious, and if he finds proof that you're behind the pamphlets, he won't just come for you. He'll come for your father, your distributors, everyone you've ever worked with. Leora's stomach twisted. I can protect you, Darian said, but only if you let me. Why would you do that? Because your words matter, he said simply, and because I don't like Garrett Thorne. He stood, moving to the bookshelves, and pulled down a leather-bound journal. He handed it to her. Liora opened it. Inside were names, dates, transactions, proof of bribes, backroom deals, policies written to benefit the wealthy at the expense of everyone else. It was evidence. Real, damning evidence. Where did you get this? She whispered. I have resources, Darian said, and patience. Liora looked up at him, her mind spinning. You want to use me? I want to work with you, he corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Darian smiled, sharp, humorless. You tell me. Liora closed the journal, her hands trembling. This was insane, but it was also the best chance she'd ever have. If I say yes, she said slowly, what happens? We move your operation, Darian said, somewhere safer. We expand distribution, and we hit Thorn where it hurts, publicly, legally, and hard enough that he can't recover. And if I say no? Then you go home, Darian said, and you hope Thorn doesn't find you first. Liora stared at him, weighing every word, every angle. Then she stood. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. She moved toward the door, but Darian's voice stopped her. Liora. She turned. He was watching her with that same unreadable expression, like he could see every thought she was trying to hide. You're good at this, he said quietly. Better than you realize. Don't let fear make you small. The words settled over her like a weight. She didn't respond. She just left. Liora walked home through streets that felt darker than before. The journal's contents burned into her mind. Darian Voss was dangerous, but so was doing nothing. By the time she reached the print shop, she'd made her decision. She was going back. And this time she wasn't running. 3 days passed before Liora went back. 3 days of sleepless nights and second-guessing every decision she'd ever made. 3 days of watching her father work the press, oblivious to the storm gathering around them. 3 days of feeling Garrett Thorne's eyes on her even when she knew he wasn't there. On the 4th night, she knocked on Darian's door again. He answered wearing the same unreadable expression, like he'd been expecting her all along. You took your time, he said. I had to be sure. And are you? Liora stepped inside without answering. The sitting room looked the same, fire burning low, wine on the table, books lining the walls, but this time there was a map spread across the table, marked with red ink. Darian closed the door behind her. Drink? No? Smart. He moved to the table, hands braced on the edge, studying the map. Liora moved closer, following his gaze. The red marks indicated distribution points. She recognized most of them. Places where her pamphlets had been dropped, circulated, read. You've been tracking me for weeks, she said. Months. The casual admission sent a chill down her spine. And you didn't stop me. Why would I? Darian looked up. You were doing my work for me? Your work. Our work. He straightened. If you're here, I assume you've made a decision. Liora crossed her arms. I want terms. Terms. If we're working together, I need guarantees. My father stays out of this, completely. If things go wrong, he doesn't pay the price. Agreed. The answer came too fast. Just like that? Liora said. Your father's not a threat, Darian said. And protecting him protects you. It's practical, not generous. She hated how much sense that made. What else? He asked. I control the content, Liora said. You don't edit, you don't censor. If I write it, it gets printed. Darian tilted his head. And if what you write is reckless? Then it's my risk to take. It's our risk, he corrected. The moment you attach my resources to your words, it becomes my problem too. Then don't attach your resources. They stared at each other across the table, neither willing to blink first. Finally, Darian smiled, thin, sharp. Fine. You control content, but I control distribution, timing, strategy. You write the fire. I decide where it burns. Liora considered that. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than working alone. Deal, she said. Darian extended his hand. She shook it. His grip was firm, cool, and over too quickly. Good, he said, turning back to the map. Then we start tonight. Tonight? Thorne's investigating a print shop on Salter Street. He thinks it's the source. It's not, but he'll figure that out soon enough. We need to move your operation before he widens the search. Liora's stomach twisted. How do you know about Salter Street? I have people in his office. Spies. Informants, Darian corrected. There's a difference. Is there? He ignored that. There's a warehouse on the east side, abandoned, owned by a shell company I control. It's secure, isolated, and large enough to house a full printing operation. We move your equipment there tomorrow night. Tomorrow? Leora's mind raced. That's not enough time. It's all the time we have. My father. We'll notice the press is gone, yes, Darian said. So we replace it. I'll have a new one delivered to the shop before dawn, same model. He'll never know. Liora stared at him. You already bought a printing press. I bought 3, Darian said. I like to plan ahead. The efficiency of it was almost insulting. Who else knows about this, she asked. No one who matters. That's not an answer. Darian met her gaze. I have a small circle, loyal, competent, discreet. You'll meet them when necessary. Until then, assume no one knows anything. Liora didn't like it. Didn't like how much control he had, how many pieces were already moving before she'd even agreed to play. But she was in now. Fine, she said. What do you need from me? Your trust, Darian said. You don't have it. I know. He almost smiled, but I'll settle for your cooperation. Team. The next night, Liora stood in the alley behind her father's shop, watching 4 men dismantle the printing press with surgical precision. They worked in silence, moving like shadows, each piece wrapped and loaded onto a cart with care. Darian stood beside her, hands in his coat pockets, expression unreadable. They're good, Liora said quietly. They're expensive, Darian replied. There's a difference. You say that a lot. Because people confuse the two. The last piece of the press was loaded. One of the men nodded to Darian, who nodded back. No words, just efficiency. The new press will be installed by morning, Darian said. Your father won't notice. He'll notice, Liora said. He notices everything. Then you'll lie. She shot him a look. Darian shrugged. You're good at it. Before she could respond, he turned and walked toward the waiting carriage. Come on, we're not done. Liora followed, her nerves buzzing. The carriage took them east, out of the clean districts and into the industrial sprawl where factories coughed smoke into the night sky. The warehouse Darian had mentioned sat at the end of a dead-end street, flanked by empty lots and rusted fences. It looked abandoned, perfect. Inside, the space was vast. High ceilings, brick walls, rows of windows covered with grime. In the center, her printing press sat like a monument, already assembled. Liora walked toward it slowly, her fingers trailing over the metal frame. This is really happening, she murmured. Did you think it wasn't? Darian said from behind her. She turned. He was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her with that same unreadable expression. I thought you'd change your mind, she admitted. I don't change my mind. Ever? Not about things that matter. The certainty in his voice unsettled her. Liora looked around the warehouse. What happens now? Now you work, Darian said. You write, you print. I'll handle the rest. The rest being? Distribution, protection, covering your tracks. He pushed off the doorframe. You focus on the words. Let me focus on keeping you alive. It should have sounded reassuring. It didn't. What if I don't want your protection? Liora said. Then you're an idiot, Darian said flatly. Thorn's not going to stop, and you can't fight him alone. I've been doing fine so far. You kissed a stranger in a public square because you were cornered, Darian said. That's not fine. That's desperation. The truth of it stung. Liora turned away, focusing on the press. I need supplies, paper, ink, type. Already ordered, Darian said. It'll be here by morning. Of course it would. You think of everything, don't you? She said. I try. She glanced back at him. Why? Why what? Why do you care? Liora gestured around the warehouse. You're a duke. You have money, power, influence. You could live your entire life without lifting a finger to help anyone. So why this? Why me? Darian was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped closer, his gaze sharp. Because the system's broken, he said quietly. And people like Thorn are the ones breaking it. I can't fix it alone. But maybe we can crack it open enough that someone else finishes the job. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. They stood there, the silence stretching between them like a rope pulled taut. Finally, Liora broke it. I need to get home. My father will wonder. I'll have someone take you, Darian said. I can walk. You can, he agreed, but you won't. It wasn't a suggestion. Liora didn't argue. Masm. The next week blurred into a rhythm that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Liora spent her days at her father's shop, keeping up appearances, and her nights at the warehouse, writing and printing with a speed she didn't know she had. Darian's resources were staggering: endless supplies, skilled workers who asked no questions, and a distribution network that reached every corner of Asheville. Her pamphlets hit the streets like wildfire. And people noticed. Conversations shifted. Debates sparked in taverns and market squares. Her words, anonymous, dangerous, became impossible to ignore. But so did the attention. Liora was in the warehouse late one night, setting type for a new piece, when Darian arrived unannounced. "We have a problem," he said. She looked up, ink-stained fingers pausing mid-motion. "What kind of problem?" "Thorne's offering a reward," Darian said. 500 gold marks for information leading to the arrest of the pamphlet writer. Liora's stomach dropped. 500? Enough to turn half the city into informants. She set down the type carefully, her mind racing. "He doesn't have proof. He's fishing." "He's escalating," Darian corrected. "And it's working. 2 of my distributors have gone quiet. They're scared." "Can you replace them?" "I can, but that's not the point." Darian moved closer, his expression hard. "Thorne's tightening the net. We need to move faster." "Faster how?" "We go after him directly." Liora frowned. "We've been going after him. Every pamphlet has been anonymous," Darian interrupted. "Safe, indirect. It's not enough. If we want to stop him, we need to hit him with something he can't ignore. Something public, something that forces a response." "Like what?" Darian pulled a folded paper from his coat and handed it to her. Liora opened it. It was a financial record, detailed, damning. Proof that Thorne had embezzled funds meant for public infrastructure and funneled them into private accounts. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "Does it matter?" "Yes." Darian's jaw tightened. "Someone owed me a favor." "Someone." "Let it go, Liora." She stared at the document, her pulse quickening. This wasn't just incendiary. This was a bomb. "If I print this," she said slowly, "he'll know we have access to his records. He'll know someone inside is feeding us information." "Yes." "He'll retaliate." "Yes." "People could die." Darian's gaze didn't waver. "People are already dying. Just slower, quieter." Liora looked down at the paper, her hands trembling. This was the line. Once she crossed it, there was no going back. "I need time to think," she said. "You don't have time." "Then I'll make it." She shoved the document back at him and turned away, her chest tight. Darian caught her wrist. "Liora." She yanked free. "Don't!" "Look at me." She turned, anger flashing. "What?" "You wanted this," Darian said. "You wanted to fight, to matter. This is what it looks like. It's not clean, it's not safe, and it's sure as hell not fair, but it's real." "I know it's real," she snapped. "I've been living it longer than you have." "Then stop hesitating." "I'm not hesitating, I'm thinking." "You're scared." The accusation hit like a slap. "Of course I'm scared," Liora said. "I'm not an idiot." "Good," Darian said. "Fear keeps you sharp, just don't let it paralyze you." He released her wrist and stepped back, his expression softening, barely. "Take the night," he said. "But by morning, I need an answer." Then he left. Liora stood alone in the warehouse, the document burning in her hand. She didn't sleep. Instead, she spent the night pacing her tiny room, turning the decision over in her mind like a puzzle she couldn't solve. Printing Thorne's financial crimes would destroy him. But it would also expose Darian's network. It would make enemies, powerful ones. And once the accusation was public, there was no taking it back. By dawn, she still hadn't decided. But when she walked into the warehouse that morning, Darian was already there, waiting. "Well?" he said. Liora set her satchel down. "I'll do it." Darian's expression didn't change. "You're sure?" "No," she said, "but I'll do it anyway." "Good enough." He handed her the document again. This time, she took it. "We print tonight," Darian said, "and we flood the city by morning." Liora nodded, her pulse hammering. This was it. No more hiding. Aw. They worked through the night, Liora setting every line herself while Darian coordinated the distribution. By sunrise, 5,000 copies were ready. Liora stood in front of the press, staring at the stacks of paper. Her words, her weapon. "Second thoughts?" Darian asked from behind her. "Too late for that?" "It's never too late." She looked at him. "You'd let me walk away? Now?" Darian shrugged. "I'd call you a coward, but I'd let you walk." Liora almost laughed. "You really don't pull punches, do you?" "Not my style." She turned back to the pamphlets. "Then let's finish this." Darian nodded and gestured to the waiting workers. They moved immediately, loading the pamphlets onto carts, covering them with tarps. Within an hour, they were gone. Liora stood in the empty warehouse, exhausted and wired, her hands still shaking. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait," Darian said. "For what?" "For Thorn to make a mistake." "What?" The city erupted by midday. Liora heard it from the print shop. Shouts in the street, arguments in the square. Her father came in from a delivery looking shaken. "Something's happening," he said. "People are talking about Councilman Thorn, saying he's a thief." Liora kept her face neutral. "Where'd they hear that?" "Pamphlets," Thomas said. "Someone's been distributing them all morning. Hundreds of them." He looked at her, searching. Liora forced herself to breathe. "What do they say?" "That he stole money meant for the water systems. That people died because of it." Thomas set down his bag. "Is it true?" "I don't know," Liora lied. Her father studied her for a long moment. Then he turned and went back to work. Leora's hands clenched beneath the counter. By evening, Thorn's people were in the streets, tearing down pamphlets, interrogating distributors. But it was too late. The words were already out, already spreading. Liora stayed at the shop until closing, then slipped out through the back. She needed to see Darian. She needed to know if this had worked. But when she reached the townhouse, the door was already open. And inside, Darian was packing. "What are you doing?" Liora asked. He didn't look up. "Leaving." "What?" "Thorn's moving faster than I expected," Darian said, shoving papers into a leather case. "He's got warrants, investigators. He's going after anyone connected to the pamphlets." Leora's blood ran cold. "Connected how?" "Distributors, printers, anyone he can tie to the network." Darian finally looked at her. "He's coming for you, Liora." "Then we fight." "With what?" Darian snapped. "We just burned our best evidence. If he arrests you now, there's nothing left to protect you." "So we run?" "I run," Darian said. "You disappear. Lay low. Let this blow over." "And if it doesn't blow over?" Darian didn't answer. Leora's chest tightened. "You're leaving me." "I'm keeping you alive," Darian said. "There's a difference." "Stop saying that!" Her voice cracked, louder than she meant. Darian went still. "I trusted you," Liora said, her voice shaking. "I risked everything because you said we could win." "We did win," Darian said quietly. "Thorn's bleeding. His allies are questioning him. The city's turning. This is what winning looks like." "It doesn't feel like it." "It never does." He closed the case and straightened. "There's a carriage waiting 2 blocks south. It'll take you out of the city. Stay gone for a week, maybe 2. By then, I'll have cleaned this up." "And if you don't?" Darian's expression hardened. "Then don't come back." The words hung between them like a blade. Liora wanted to scream, to argue, to make him see how wrong this was. But she didn't, because he was right. She turned and walked toward the door. "Liora." She stopped but didn't turn. "You did good," Darian said quietly. "Better than I expected." She left without answering. The carriage was exactly where he said it would be. Liora climbed in, her chest tight, her mind spinning. As the city disappeared behind her, she pulled out the last pamphlet she'd kept, the one with Thorn's crimes printed in stark black ink. She read it again and realized something. Darian had lied. Not about the evidence, not about the danger, but about leaving. He wasn't running. He was drawing Thorne's attention away from her, and he was doing it alone. Liora lasted exactly 4 hours outside the city before she turned the carriage around. The driver protested, said he had orders, said the Duke would have his head, but Liora didn't care. She told him to take her back or she'd walk. He chose the former. By the time they reached Ashvale's outskirts, night had fallen again. The city sprawled before her like a sleeping beast, windows glowing amber, smoke rising from chimneys. Somewhere in that mess, Darian was making himself a target, and she was done running. The carriage dropped her 2 streets from the townhouse. Liora moved fast, keeping to the shadows, her satchel tight against her ribs. The streets were quieter than usual, too quiet, like the city was holding its breath. When she reached the townhouse, the door was locked. She knocked, waited. Nothing. She knocked harder, frustration rising. "Darian, I know you're in there." Still nothing. Liora stepped back, scanning the windows. All dark. Either he was gone, or he was ignoring her. She picked up a stone from the gutter and threw it at the second-floor window. It hit with a sharp crack. 30 seconds later, the door opened. Darian stood in the doorway, shirt half unbuttoned, hair disheveled, looking more annoyed than surprised. "You're supposed to be gone," he said. "I came back." "I can see that. Are you going to let me in or not?" Darian sighed and stepped aside. Liora brushed past him into the sitting room. It looked different, papers scattered across the table, empty glasses, a half-burned candle. He'd been working. "You lied to me," she said, turning to face him. Darian closed the door. "About?" "Leaving. You're not running. You're staying here and painting a target on your back." "That's not a lie," Darian said. "That's strategy. It's suicide." "It's practical." He moved to the table, gathering papers into loose piles. "Thorne's looking for someone to blame. If I give him a target, he stops looking at you. And when he arrests you, he won't. You don't know that." "I know he needs proof," Darian said, glancing up, "and I've spent years making sure he doesn't have any." Liora crossed her arms. "You can't control everything. Watch me." The arrogance should have been infuriating. Instead, it was almost reassuring. Almost. "What's the plan?" Liora asked. "There is no plan. Not for you." Darian set the papers down. "You go back to the carriage and you leave. That's it." "No." "Liora, I'm not leaving," she said flatly. "You can argue, threaten, or throw me out, but I'll just come back. So save us both the time and tell me what you're doing." Darian stared at her, jaw tight. Then he exhaled slowly and leaned against the table. "Fine. You want to know? Thorne's called a council session for tomorrow morning. Public. He's going to demand an investigation into the pamphlets and push for emergency powers to restore order." "Emergency powers," Liora repeated, "meaning he gets to arrest anyone he wants without oversight." Her stomach turned. "He's using this to consolidate power." "Of course he is," Darian said. "He's not stupid. He knows the pamphlets hurt him, so he's flipping the narrative, making himself the victim and us the threat." "Can he do that?" "If the council votes yes." Darian's expression darkened. "Which they will, unless someone stops them." "Someone being you. Someone being us." The word landed heavy. Liora frowned. "I thought you wanted me gone." "I wanted you safe," Darian corrected. "But if you're staying, you might as well be useful." "Flattering." "I don't flatter." He pushed off the table and moved to the far wall, pulling down a map of the city. "The session's at 10. Council chambers, public gallery. If we're going to stop this, we need leverage, something Thorne can't ignore." "We already published his crimes." "And he's calling it slander," Darian said. "We need a witness, someone who can testify." Leora's pulse quickened. "You have someone?" "Maybe." "That's not an answer." Darian circled a spot on the map, a district near the river docks. "There's a clerk. Works in the city treasury. He's been skimming records for months, copying everything Thorne touches. If we can get him to testify, Thorne's done. And if he won't, then we're done." The bluntness of it was almost funny. "Where is he?" Liora asked. "Hiding," Darian said. "He's terrified. Thinks Thorn will kill him if he talks. Will he? Probably. Liora absorbed that. So we convince him the risk is worth it. We don't have to convince him, Darian said. We just have to get him to the council chambers alive. Once he's there publicly, Thorn can't touch him without proving our point. It was a gamble. A massive, dangerous gamble. But it was all they had. When do we move? Liora asked. Now, Batit. But the dock smelled like fish and rust. Liora followed Darian through narrow alleys slick with rain, her boots splashing through puddles. The buildings here were packed tight, leaning against each other like drunks. Lights flickered in windows, candles, oil lamps, nothing electric. Darian stopped in front of a sagging tenement and glanced back at her. Stay close. Don't talk unless I tell you to. I know how to handle myself. I'm sure you do, Darian said. But these people don't know you, and trust is expensive here. He knocked 3 times, paused, then knocked twice more. The door cracked open. A man peered out, thin, balding, eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept in days. Voss, the man said. Emmett. The man's gaze flicked to Liora. Who's she? A friend. I don't like friends. You don't like anyone, Darian said. Let us in. Emmett hesitated, then stepped aside. The interior was cramped and dim, cluttered with papers and books stacked in precarious towers. It smelled like old coffee and desperation. Emmett locked the door behind them and turned, arms crossed. You shouldn't be here. You're right, Darian said, but here I am. Thorn's got people watching. If they see you, they won't. Emmett laughed bitterly. You always say that. And I'm always right. Liora glanced around the room. The papers on the desk were covered in numbers, ledgers, transaction records, notes scrawled in cramped handwriting. You've been busy, she said. Emmett's eyes narrowed. Who the hell is she? The one who published Thorn's dirty laundry, Darian said. Emmett went pale. You brought the pamphlet writer here? Are you insane? Debatable, Darian said. But we're not here to debate. We need you at the council session tomorrow. No. Emmett, I said no. Emmett backed toward the desk, shaking his head. You publish documents, fine. That's your risk. But I'm not standing in front of the council and signing my own death warrant. You're already a dead man, Liora said quietly. Both men looked at her. Thorn knows someone's feeding us information, she continued. He's not stupid. He'll narrow it down. And when he does, you think hiding in this room will save you? Emmett's jaw worked. I'll leave the city. And go where? Liora asked. Thorn's reach isn't limited to Ashvale, you know that. She's right, Darian said. Your only chance is to go public. Once you testify, you're protected. Thorn can't touch you without proving he's guilty. Or he just kills me and calls it an accident, Emmett snapped. Not if the whole city's watching, Darian said. Emmett laughed, sharp, bitter. You're asking me to bet my life on public opinion. I'm asking you to bet your life on the truth, Darian said, which is a hell of a lot better than betting it on silence. The room went quiet. Emmett turned away, running a hand through his thinning hair. I have a daughter, he said quietly. She's 8. If I do this and Thorn retaliates, we'll protect her, Liora said. Emmett turned. You can't promise that. No, Liora admitted. But I can promise that if you don't do this, nothing changes. Thorn stays in power, and your daughter grows up in a city where people like him win. Emmett stared at her, his expression cracking. I'll think about it, he said finally. We don't have time for thinking, Darian said. Then you don't have a witness. Emmett's voice hardened. Come back tomorrow morning. I'll give you my answer then. Darian looked like he wanted to argue, but Liora touched his arm. Let's go. He shot her a look, but she shook her head slightly. Darian exhaled and turned toward the door. Tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock. If you're not here, we move without you. Emmett didn't respond. They left. Outside, the rain had picked up, cold and relentless. Liora pulled her coat tighter. He's not going to do it, Darian said. He might. You heard him. He's terrified. Fear doesn't mean no, Liora said. It just means he needs time. Darian stopped walking and turned to face her. We don't have time. Then we make time. By doing what? Liora hesitated. An idea was forming, reckless and dangerous, but it was there. What if we didn't need him to testify? She said slowly. Darian frowned. What are you talking about? What if I did it? The words hung in the rain-soaked air. Darian stared at her. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? You can't testify, Darian said. You're the anonymous writer. The moment you stand up in that chamber, you're confessing to everything Thorne's accused you of. Exactly, Liora said. He's been hunting shadows. What if I step into the light? What if I own it publicly and dare him to arrest me in front of the entire city? That's insane. It's bold. It's suicide. Maybe, Liora said, but it's also the only move he won't expect. Darian shook his head. If you do this, there's no taking it back. You'll be a target for the rest of your life. I'm already a target. Not like this. Then what do you suggest? Liora challenged. We wait for Emmett? Hope he grows a spine? Thorne's session is in 12 hours. If we don't act, he wins. Darian's jaw tightened. Rain dripped from his hair, soaking his coat, but he didn't seem to notice. If you do this, he said quietly, I can't protect you. I'm not asking you to. Liora, I'm serious. She stepped closer. You've been trying to keep me safe since the beginning, but I didn't start this to stay safe. I started it to matter. Darian looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You're going to get yourself killed, he said. Probably. And you're okay with that? No, Liora said, but I'd rather die standing than live hiding. Darian was silent for a long moment. Then he turned and started walking again. Come on. Where are we going? To prepare your testimony, he said without looking back. If you're going to throw yourself off a cliff, you might as well do it right. They spent the rest of the night in the townhouse, drafting what Liora would say. Darian paced while she wrote, offering edits, challenging weak points, sharpening arguments. It was brutal, exhausting, and strangely exhilarating. By dawn, they had something solid. Liora read through it one last time, her hands trembling slightly. It's good, Darian said from across the table. It's terrifying. That's how you know it's good. She set the paper down and looked at him. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, stubble darkening his jaw, but his gaze was sharp as ever. What happens after? She asked. After you testify? After everything. Darian leaned back in his chair. Thorne either backs down or escalates. If he backs down, you've won. If he escalates, you've started a war. And if it's a war, then we fight it. The simplicity of it almost made her laugh. You make it sound easy, she said. It's not easy, Darian said, but it's simple. You tell the truth. He tries to bury it. We make sure he can't. We, he repeated. Liora studied him across the table. Why are you really doing this? I told you. No, she interrupted. You told me what you think I want to hear, but I'm asking what's real. Darian went still. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table, and met her gaze. Because I'm tired, he said quietly. Tired of watching people like Thorne destroy everything they touch while the rest of us pretend it's normal. Tired of being complicit just because I have the luxury of distance. He paused. And because you remind me that there are still people willing to burn for what they believe in, he said. Even when it's reckless. Even when it's stupid. Leora's throat tightened. That's not an answer either, she said. Darian smiled faintly. It's the best one you're getting. The council chambers were packed. Liora stood in the public gallery, wedged between strangers, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Below, the council sat in a semicircle. 12 men in dark robes, Garrett Thorne at the center like a spider in a web. Darian was somewhere in the crowd. She couldn't see him, but she knew he was there. Thorne stood, his voice carrying across the chamber. We are here to address a matter of public safety. Radical pamphlets have been circulating throughout Ashevale, spreading lies and inciting unrest. This council has a duty to restore order. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. I propose emergency powers, Thorne continued, granting this council the authority to investigate and prosecute those responsible without delay. One of the counselors raised a hand. And what evidence do you have that these pamphlets pose a genuine threat? The evidence is in the streets, Thorne said smoothly. Violence, vandalism, distrust of lawful authority. This is not free speech. This is sedition. Liora's hands clenched. It was time. She stood. Every head in the gallery turned. I wrote them. Her voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. Thorne's gaze snapped to her, his expression freezing. I wrote the pamphlets, Liora said louder now. Every word and everything in them is true. The chamber erupted. Shouts, gasps, counselors rising from their seats. Thorne's face went from shock to fury in the span of a heartbeat. Arrest her, he said. 2 guards moved toward the gallery stairs, but Liora wasn't done. Garrett Thorne embezzled public funds, she said, her voice rising over the chaos. I have proof, records, testimony. And if this council grants him emergency powers, you're not restoring order. You're handing a criminal the keys to the kingdom. She's lying, Thorne snapped. Then let me present my evidence, Liora shot back. You have no right to speak here. I have every right, Leora's voice cracked with fury. You've been hunting me for weeks. Well, here I am. Arrest me if you want, but do it publicly. Let the city see what happens to people who tell the truth. The guards reached her. One grabbed her arm, and then Darian's voice cut through the noise. Let her speak. The crowd parted. Darian stood near the front, his presence commanding attention without effort. Thorne's eyes narrowed. Duke Voss, I didn't realize you had an interest in sedition. I have an interest in justice, Darian said, and I believe Miss Hale deserves to be heard. She's a criminal. Then charge her, Darian said. Formally, publicly. Let the courts decide. Thorne's jaw worked. He was trapped. If he arrested her now without a trial, he proved her point. If he let her speak, she'd destroy him. Fine, Thorne said finally. Let her speak. The guard released Leora's arm. She stepped forward, her pulse roaring, every eye in the chamber on her. This was it. No turning back. Garrett Thorne stole from this city, she said, her voice steady now. Not just money. Hope. Safety. Lives. And he did it because he thought no one would stop him. She pulled a folded paper from her coat, a copy of the financial records Darian had given her. This is proof, she said, and I'm prepared to testify under oath. Thorne's expression was stone, but his hands, resting on the table, were shaking. Liora met his gaze and didn't look away. So go ahead, she said quietly. Arrest me. Silence me. But you can't silence everyone. And the truth doesn't disappear just because you're afraid of it. The chamber was dead silent. Then someone in the gallery started clapping. Slowly, others joined. The applause built like a wave, rolling through the chamber, unstoppable. Thorne's face went white, and Liora realized she'd won, not the war, but this battle. Then the doors burst open. Armed men poured in, wearing Thorne's colors, and Liora's triumph turned to ice. The armed men moved like they'd rehearsed this, fast, coordinated, fanning out across the chamber with weapons drawn. Not swords, clubs, meant to intimidate, not kill, at least not yet. The applause died instantly. Panic rippled through the gallery. People scrambled backward, pressing against walls, looking for exits that didn't exist. Liora stood frozen, her testimony still clutched in her hand, as Thorne rose slowly from his seat. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes gleamed. Counselors, Thorne said, his voice cutting through the chaos. As you can see, the threat is real. This woman has incited a mob. She's disrupted lawful proceedings, and unless we act now, this chamber, this city, will descend into anarchy. One of the counselors, an older man with silver hair, stood shakily. Councilman Thorne, you can't just— I can, Thorne interrupted. Emergency powers were proposed. The threat is present. I'm invoking provisional authority until this council votes. That's not legal, Darian's voice rang out. Thorne's gaze snapped to him. Duke Voss, how convenient that you're here. Convenient for you or for justice? Darian stepped forward, hands loose at his sides, utterly calm despite the armed men surrounding them. Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a coup. This is restoration of order. This is you panicking. Thorne's jaw tightened. Arrest them both. Two guards moved toward Liora. Another pair headed for Darian. But before they reached either of them, the chamber doors burst open again. Emmett stood in the doorway, breathing hard, clutching a leather satchel to his chest. Every eye turned to him. Wait, Emmett gasped. I have something to say. Thorne went very still. Leora's heart lurched. Emmett had come. Despite everything, despite his fear, he'd come. Who the hell are you? One of the counselors demanded. Emmett Caro, he said, stepping inside. His voice shook, but he kept moving. City Treasury. I'd have been keeping records. Everything Councilman Thorne's done for the past 2 years. He held up the satchel. It's all here, Emmett said. Every transaction, every bribe, every lie. The gallery erupted again. Shouts, gasps, confusion. Thorne's expression twisted. That man is a disgruntled employee with a grudge. His testimony is worthless. Then why are you so afraid of it? Liora called out. Thorne's gaze snapped back to her, venomous. Arrest all 3 of them, he ordered. The guards moved, but Darian was faster. He grabbed the nearest guard's wrist, twisted, and sent the man stumbling into his partner. It wasn't brutal, just efficient. The kind of move that came from training, not desperation. Touch her, Darian said quietly. And this gets ugly. The guards hesitated. Thorne's face flushed red. Do your job. Stand down. The new voice came from the entrance. A woman stepped into the chamber, tall, sharp-featured, wearing the deep blue robes of a high magistrate. Liora recognized her from the pamphlets she'd researched. Magistrate Liora si Magistrate Liora Varen. One of the few council members who'd openly questioned Thorne's policies. Magistrate Varen, Thorne said tightly. This is a council matter. This is a circus, Varen said flatly. She moved to the center of the chamber, her gaze sweeping over the armed men. And you're making it worse. I'm restoring order. You're terrified. Varen's voice was calm, clinical. Which tells me Miss Hale's accusations have merit. They're slander. Then let the courts decide. Varen turned to the guards. Lower your weapons, now. The guards looked at Thorne, Thorne's hands clenched. I gave an order. And I'm countermanding it, Varen said. As senior magistrate, I have authority in matters of public safety. And right now, you're the threat. The chamber held its breath. Slowly, the guards lowered their clubs. Thorne's face went from red to white. He looked like a man watching his kingdom crumble in real time. This isn't over, he said. No, Varen agreed. It's not. Sit down, councilman. Thorne didn't move. Sit, Varen repeated, or I'll have you removed. For a moment, Liora thought he'd refuse, thought he'd fight, scream, burn the chamber down rather than lose. But Thorne sat. The room exhaled. Varen turned to Liora. Miss Hale, you claim to have evidence of criminal conduct? Leora's voice came out steadier than she felt. Yes. And you're willing to testify under oath? Yes, Varen nodded. Then we'll convene a formal inquiry, open to the public. You, Mr. Caro, and any other witnesses will present your evidence. The council will review it, and we will vote on appropriate action. When? Darian asked. 3 days, Varen said. That gives both sides time to prepare. 3 days gives him time to destroy evidence, Liora said. Which is why I'm placing Mr. Caro's records under magistrate protection, Varen said. She gestured to Emmett. Hand them over. Emmett hesitated, then crossed the chamber and gave her the satchel. Varen accepted it without comment and turned to Thorne. You are suspended from council duties pending the inquiry, effective immediately. Thorne stood abruptly. You can't. I can, Varen said. And I am. You're dismissed, councilman. The chamber was dead silent. Thorne stared at her, trembling with fury. Then he turned and walked out, his guards trailing behind him. The doors slammed shut. Leora's knees almost gave out. She grabbed the railing to steady herself, her pulse hammering. It was done. Not finished, but done. Varen turned to the remaining counselors. This session is adjourned. We reconvene in 3 days. She looked at Liora. Miss Hale, you'll be summoned as a witness. I suggest you prepare thoroughly. Liora nodded, unable to speak. Varen swept out, leaving the chamber buzzing with noise. Darian appeared at Leora's side, his hand on her elbow. We need to leave. Now. What? Why? Because Thorn just lost everything publicly, Darian said, which means he's going to do something desperate, and I'd rather not be here when he does. That made sense. Too much sense. Liora let Darian guide her through the crowd, Emmett falling into step beside them. They pushed through the gallery, down the stairs, out into the bright morning air. Liora stopped on the steps, breathing hard, her hands shaking. I can't believe that worked, she said. It didn't work, Darian said. It bought us time. 3 days. 3 days to prepare, Darian said, and to make sure Thorn doesn't kill us before the inquiry. Emmett looked pale. He's going to come after me. He's going to come after all of us, Darian said. He glanced around the square. People were pouring out of the chamber, talking in loud, agitated clusters. But right now, he's scrambling. We have an advantage. For how long? Liora asked. Not long enough. Darian started walking. Come on, we need to regroup. They moved quickly through the city, keeping to busy streets where crowds provided cover. Darian led them to a different townhouse, larger, more secure, with high walls and locked gates. Inside, the space was sparse but functional. A sitting room. A study. Minimal furniture. What is this place? Liora asked. Safe house, Darian said. He locked the door behind them and moved to the windows, checking the street outside. I keep a few scattered around the city, just in case. Just in case of what? This. Emmett collapsed into a chair, his face in his hands. I can't believe I did that. You saved us, Liora said. I signed my death warrant. We all did, Darian said. He turned from the window. But we're not dead yet. Comforting, Emmett muttered. Liora sat down across from him. Why did you come? Emmett looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. Because you were right. About my daughter, about the city. He exhaled shakily. I spent 2 years watching Thorn steal and lie and destroy people, and I did nothing. Just kept my head down and told myself it wasn't my problem. He looked at Liora. But it is my problem, he said quietly. It's everyone's problem, and if I don't fight it now, when will I? Leora's throat tightened. Thank you. Emmett nodded, but didn't respond. Darian moved to the table and pulled out a map of the city. We have 3 days to prepare. That means cataloging every piece of evidence, coordinating witnesses, and making sure Thorn doesn't sabotage the inquiry. How do we do that? Liora asked. By staying ahead of him, Darian said. He marked several points on the map. Thorn's network is large, but it's not infinite. He relies on key people, enforcers, informants, allies in the council. If we can cut off those connections, we weaken him. And if we can't? Emmett asked. Then we make sure the inquiry happens anyway. How? Darian glanced up. By making it too public to stop. Liora frowned. What does that mean? It means we flood the city with information, Darian said. Everything we have. Every document, every testimony, every shred of evidence. We print it, distribute it, make it impossible to ignore. That's risky, Liora said. Everything's risky. Darian's gaze sharpened. But if Thorn's going to attack us, I'd rather do it with the entire city watching. Liora considered that. It was bold, reckless, exactly the kind of move Thorn wouldn't expect, which meant it might work. We'll need help, she said. I know. Darian folded the map. I'll reach out to my contacts. You focus on writing the summary, something clear, concise, undeniable. We print it tomorrow night and distribute by dawn. That's 1 day to prepare? Then we'd better work fast. They worked through the night and into the next day. Liora drafted the summary while Darian coordinated logistics. Emmett helped cross-reference documents, his knowledge of the treasury proving invaluable. By evening, they had something solid, a 10-page report outlining Thorn's crimes in brutal detail. Liora read through it one last time, exhaustion pulling at her bones. It's good, Darian said from across the table. It's damning, Liora corrected. Same thing. She set the pages down. If we publish this, there's no going back. We already crossed that line. I know. Liora rubbed her eyes. I just need to say it out loud. Darian leaned back in his chair. You've done good work, Liora. Better than I expected. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. She looked at him. He looked as tired as she felt, stubble darkening his jaw, shadows under his eyes. But there was something else there, too. Something almost like respect. What happens after the inquiry? She asked. After? If we win, if Thorne's convicted, what happens to us? Darian was quiet for a moment. You keep writing, I keep fighting. We find the next Thorne and do it again. That sounds exhausting. It is. And you're okay with that? I don't have to be okay with it, Darian said. I just have to do it. The simplicity of that answer settled over her like a weight. You're a strange man, Darian Voss, Liora said. I've been called worse. She almost smiled. Then Emmett's voice broke the moment. We have a problem. They both turned. Emmett stood by the window, his face pale. There are men outside. Darian moved to the window immediately, his expression hardening. How many? Liora asked. 6, Darian said. Maybe more around back. Thorne's people? Probably. Leora's pulse quickened. What do we do? Darian stepped back from the window, his mind clearly racing. We can't fight them. Too many. But if we run, they'll follow, Liora finished. Exactly. Emmett looked terrified. We're trapped. Not yet. Darian moved to the door, checking the locks. There's a back exit, leads to the alley. If we move fast, we can get out before they breach the front. And then what? Liora asked. Then we split up. Make it harder to track all of us. That's not a plan, Liora said. That's running. It's surviving, Darian corrected, which is what we need to do right now. A loud crash echoed from the front of the house. They were out of time. Darian grabbed the satchel with the documents. Move! Now! They ran. Through the sitting room, down a narrow hallway, out a back door that opened onto a dark alley. The night air hit Liora like a slap, cold and sharp. Behind them, voices shouted. Darian shoved the satchel into Leora's hands. Take this. Get to the warehouse. Don't stop. What about you? I'll draw them off. Darian, curse. Go! He turned and ran in the opposite direction, his footsteps echoing off the cobblestones. Liora hesitated for half a second. Then she ran. Emmett followed, gasping for breath. They moved through alleys and side streets, keeping to the shadows, the satchel heavy against Leora's ribs. She didn't look back. Set. They reached the warehouse an hour later, breathless and shaking. Liora unlocked the side door and pulled Emmett inside, slamming it shut behind them. The space was dark, silent. Is he coming back? Emmett asked. I don't know. Liora moved to the press, setting the satchel down carefully. Her hands were trembling. We should print the report, she said. Now? Now. Because if Darian didn't come back, if Thorne's men caught him, if everything fell apart, at least the truth would be out there. Emmett helped her set the type, his hand steadier than she expected. They worked in silence, the rhythmic clunk of the press filling the space. By dawn, they had 500 copies. Liora stared at the stacks of paper, her chest tight. Then the door opened. She spun, heart hammering. Darian stood in the doorway, bruised and limping, but alive. You made it, Liora breathed. Barely. He stepped inside, wincing. They're still looking. We don't have much time. We have this. Liora gestured to the pamphlets. It's ready. Darian looked at the stacks, then at her. Good. Let's finish this. By midday, the city was drowning in paper. Leora's report appeared everywhere, nailed to posts, handed out in markets, shoved under doors. People read it in taverns, in workshops, in the streets. The word spread like fire, and the city started to turn. Liora watched from the warehouse window as crowds gathered in the square, reading aloud, arguing, demanding answers. The noise grew louder, angrier. It's working, Emmett said quietly. It's starting, Darian corrected. That night, Magistrate Varon issued a public statement. The inquiry would proceed as scheduled. Thorne's suspension was upheld. and the evidence would be reviewed in full. Thorne released his own statement an hour later, calling the report fabricated and promising to clear his name, but his voice was drowned out by the crowds. Liora stood in the warehouse, reading the statements side by side, and felt something shift. Not victory, not yet, but momentum. For the first time, Thorne was on the defensive, and the city was watching. "We did it," she said quietly. Darian looked at her. "We started it." "Is there a difference?" "Always." But for once, his smile was almost genuine. The inquiry began 2 days later. The council chamber was packed beyond capacity, people spilling into the hallways and the square outside. Magistrate Varon presided, flanked by the remaining councillors. Thorne sat alone at the defense table, his lawyer beside him, his expression carved from stone. Liora sat in the gallery, Darian beside her, Emmett on her other side. Her testimony came first. She stood, walked to the witness stand, and swore her oath. Then she spoke. She told them everything. The pamphlets, the evidence, the threats, the truth. Her voice didn't shake. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Thorne's lawyer stood to cross-examine, but before he could speak, Emmett was called. He walked to the stand, pale but determined, and presented his records. Transaction logs, forged signatures, dates and amounts that matched Liora's accusations perfectly. The counselors leaned forward, studying the documents. Thorne's lawyer tried to discredit him, but Emmett didn't falter. "I watched him do it," Emmett said quietly. "For 2 years. I watched, and I said nothing. I won't stay silent anymore." The gallery erupted in applause. Varon called for order, but the damage was done. The inquiry continued for hours. More witnesses testified, more evidence was presented, and slowly, inevitably, Thorne's defense crumbled. By evening, the vote was called. 11 counselors voted to strip Thorne of his position and refer him for criminal prosecution. 1 abstained. Thorne sat motionless as the verdict was read, his face blank. Then he stood and walked out without a word. The chamber exploded. Liora sat frozen, unable to process it. They'd won. Actually won. Darian's hand found hers, squeezing once. "We did it," he said quietly. Liora looked at him, tears burning her eyes. "We did." Outside, the crowd roared, and for the first time in months, Liora let herself breathe. The celebration didn't last. Liora stood in the square outside the council chambers, surrounded by cheering strangers, and felt nothing but exhaustion. People grabbed her hands, shouted her name, thanked her like she'd single-handedly saved the city. Maybe she had. Maybe they all had. It was hard to tell through the noise. Darian appeared at her elbow, his hand on her back. "We need to leave." "Why?" "Because Thorne's not done." Liora turned. "He lost. The council voted to prosecute," Darian interrupted, "not to arrest, and until he's in custody, he's dangerous." "You think he'll run?" "I think he'll retaliate." The certainty in his voice cut through her fatigue. Liora scanned the crowd. Faces everywhere, all jubilant, all distracted. Perfect cover for someone with nothing left to lose. "Where's Emmett?" she asked. Darian's expression tightened. "He left 10 minutes ago, said he needed to check on his daughter." "Alone?" "I tried to stop him." Leora's stomach dropped. "We have to find him." They pushed through the crowd, moving fast. Darian knew the route Emmett would take, north through the market district, toward the river where his daughter stayed with her grandmother. They moved in silence, urgency replacing celebration. The market was chaos, vendors shouting, people celebrating, noise everywhere. Leora's pulse hammered as they wove through stalls and carts. Then she saw him. Emmett, standing near a fountain, talking to a woman holding a little girl's hand. His daughter. She looked exactly like him. Same narrow face, same nervous energy. Relief flooded through Liora. Then she saw the man approaching from behind. One of Thorne's guards. She recognized him from the council chamber, broad-shouldered, scarred jaw, moving with purpose. "Emmett!" Liora shouted. Emmett turned, saw her, then saw the guard. He pushed his daughter toward the woman, her grandmother, and started to run. The guard grabbed him. Emmett struggled, but the guard was stronger, dragging him backward into an alley. Liora ran. Darian was faster. He reached the alley first, grabbed the guard's shoulder, and yanked him around. The guard swung. Darian blocked, stepped inside, and drove his fist into the man's ribs. The guard stumbled but didn't fall. Liora reached Emmett, pulling him upright. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." The guard lunged at Darian again. This time, Darian didn't hold back. He caught the man's wrist, twisted hard, and slammed him against the wall. The guard's head cracked against brick. He slid to the ground, dazed. Darian turned, breathing hard. "We're leaving, now." Emmett looked back toward his daughter, still standing with her grandmother, wide-eyed and terrified. "I can't just—" "You can," Darian said, "and you will. Because if Thorne's sending people after you in broad daylight, it means he's desperate, and desperate men don't stop." Emmett's face crumpled. "What about my daughter?" "I'll have her protected," Darian said, "but right now you need to disappear." Liora touched Emmett's arm. "He's right. If they take you, they take everything, the testimony, the evidence, all of it." Emmett looked at her, then back at his daughter. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." They left the market quickly, cutting through back streets. Darian led them to another safe house, smaller, more isolated, tucked into a residential quarter where no one asked questions. Inside, Emmett collapsed into a chair, his hands shaking. "I should have stayed with her," he said. "You kept her safe," Liora said. "That's what matters." "Did I? Or did I just make everything worse?" Darian poured a glass of water and handed it to him. "You did the right thing. Now let us handle the rest." Emmett drank without responding. Liora moved to the window, watching the street. It was quiet. Too quiet. "What now?" she asked. "Now we make sure Thorne's actually arrested," Darian said. "The council voted to prosecute, but someone has to enforce it. And if Thorne's willing to send guards after Emmett, he's not planning to surrender quietly." "Who enforces it?" "City magistrates. They have authority to issue warrants and deploy the city guard." "Will they?" Darian's jaw tightened. "They should, but should and will are different things." Liora turned from the window. "Then we make them." "How?" She thought fast, her mind racing through possibilities. "The same way we made the council act. We make it public. We force their hand." Darian frowned. "You want to publish another pamphlet?" "No," Liora said. "I want to stand in the square and tell everyone what's happening. If the magistrates won't arrest Thorne, the city needs to know why." "That's dangerous." "Everything's dangerous." Darian studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded. "All right, we do it tonight." By sunset, word had spread. Liora stood on a wooden platform in the central square, surrounded by hundreds of people. Torches lit the space, casting flickering shadows across the cobblestones. The crowd pressed close, faces expectant. Darian stood nearby, arms crossed, scanning for threats. Emmett had stayed behind, too recognizable, too vulnerable. Liora's hands trembled as she looked out at the sea of faces. Then she spoke. "Garrett Thorne was convicted today," she began, her voice carrying over the square. "The council voted. The evidence was clear. He stole from this city. He lied to you. And now he's supposed to face justice." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "But he's still free," Liora continued. "Still walking the streets. Still protected by the same system that enabled him in the first place." Louder murmurs now. Anger building. "The magistrates have the authority to arrest him," Liora said. "But they haven't. Why? Because arresting a councilman is complicated. Because it requires courage. Because it's easier to delay and hope the problem goes away." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But we're not going away," Liora said. "And neither is the truth. Garrett Thorne doesn't get to walk free just because the people in power are too afraid to act." The crowd erupted in shouts of agreement. "So here's what we do," Liora said, her voice rising. "We demand action. We go to the magistrate's office. We stand outside until they issue the warrant, and we don't leave until Thorne is in custody." The crowd roared. Liora stepped down from the platform, her heart pounding. Darian appeared at her side. That was reckless. It worked. It started something, he corrected. Whether it works depends on what happens next. The crowd was already moving, flowing toward the magistrate's office like a river. Liora joined them, swept up in the momentum. They reached the office within minutes, a tall stone building with arched windows and heavy doors. The crowd filled the street outside, chanting, demanding justice. Inside, lights flickered on, figures moved behind windows. Then the doors opened. Magistrate Varen stepped out, flanked by two clerks. She looked exhausted. "Miss Hale," Varen said, "I assume this is your doing." "The people want answers," Liora said. "The people want blood." "They want justice," Liora corrected. "There's a difference." Varen's gaze swept over the crowd. "Do they know the difference?" "Do you?" Varen's jaw tightened. She stepped forward, raising her hands for silence. The crowd quieted. "The warrant for Garrett Thorne's arrest was issued 1 hour ago," Varen said. "City guards are currently en route to his estate. He will be taken into custody before dawn." The crowd erupted again, this time in cheers. Liora felt her knees weaken. It was real. Actually real. Varen looked at her. "Satisfied?" "For now," Liora said. Varen almost smiled. Then she turned and went back inside. The crowd lingered, celebrating, but Liora stepped away, needing air. Darian followed. "You okay?" "I don't know," Liora admitted. "I thought I'd feel different, relieved, maybe, or vindicated." "And?" "I just feel tired." Darian nodded. "That's normal." "Is it?" "You just dismantled a councilman and forced the magistrates to act. You're allowed to be tired." Liora looked at him. "What about you? How do you feel?" Darian considered that. "Like we won a battle, not the war." "There's always another war, isn't there?" "Always." They stood in silence, watching the crowd disperse. Then Liora asked, "What happens to us now?" "What do you want to happen?" She didn't have an answer. Thorne was arrested before dawn. Liora heard about it from a street vendor the next morning. City guards had surrounded his estate, forced entry, and dragged him out in chains. He tried to bribe them, then threatened them, then finally went silent. By midday, he was in a cell. By evening, the city felt different. Liora stood in the print shop, staring at the press her father still didn't know had been replaced. The shop was quiet. Her father had gone to deliver an order. She was alone. For the first time in weeks, she had nothing urgent to do, no pamphlets to write, no threats to dodge, no battles to fight. It felt strange. The door opened. Darian stepped inside, carrying a folded newspaper. "Have you seen this?" he asked. Liora took the paper. The headline read, "Councilman Thorne arrested on corruption charges." Below it, her name appeared. Liora Hale, key witness. Her stomach twisted. "They printed my name." "You stood in a public square and gave a speech," Darian said. "You're not anonymous anymore." "I know." She set the paper down, her hands trembling slightly. "Does that bother you?" Darian asked. "Yes," Liora said. "And no, I don't know." Darian leaned against the counter. "You're going to be a target for the rest of your life. You know that, right?" "I figured." "And you're okay with it?" Liora looked at him. "Are you asking if I regret it?" "I'm asking if you're prepared for what comes next." She thought about that. About the years ahead, the fight still waiting, the enemies she'd made. "No," she said honestly. "I'm not prepared. But I'll figure it out." Darian smiled faintly. "Good answer." "What about you?" Liora asked. "What's next for Duke Voss?" "Same thing as before," Darian said. "Finding the next Thorne. Stopping them before they do too much damage." "Sounds exhausting." "It is. And lonely." Darian's expression shifted, barely, but enough. "It doesn't have to be," Liora said quietly. He looked at her, really looked at her, like he was seeing her for the first time all over again. "What are you saying?" he asked. "I'm saying I'm good at this," Liora said. "Writing, investigating, fighting. And you're good at strategy, resources, making impossible things happen. We work well together." "We do." "So why stop?" Darian was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Because it's dangerous. Everything's dangerous. Because you'll make enemies. I already have. Because," he stopped, his jaw tight. "Because I don't want you to get hurt." The admission hung in the air between them. Liora stepped closer. "I'm going to get hurt whether I work with you or not. At least this way, I'm fighting for something that matters." Darian studied her face. "You're sure? Are you?" He didn't answer right away. Then he extended his hand. "Partners?" Liora shook it. "Partners." His grip was firm, warm, and lingered just a second longer than necessary. "Good," Darian said, "because I have a list of people who need investigating." Liora almost laughed. "Of course you do." Isamt. The trial began 3 weeks later. Thorne pled not guilty, hired the best lawyers money could buy, and fought every charge. But the evidence was overwhelming. Emmett's records, Liora's testimony, witnesses from across the city. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The verdict came back unanimous, guilty on all counts. Thorne was sentenced to 15 years in prison. His assets were seized. His allies abandoned him. Liora watched the sentencing from the gallery, Darian beside her. When the judge read the verdict, Thorne didn't react. He just sat there, blank-faced, as guards led him away. Liora expected to feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, she just felt empty. "It's not enough," she said quietly. Darian glanced at her. "What do you mean?" 15 years. That's not enough, not for what he did. It's what the law allows. The law's broken. I know." Liora looked at him. "So we fix it. That'll take more than pamphlets." "Then we do more than pamphlets." Darian smiled, small, genuine. "You really don't stop, do you?" "Not anymore." They left the courtroom together, stepping into sunlight that felt almost blinding after weeks of trials and testimony. The city stretched out before them, messy and complicated and still broken in 100 ways. But it was theirs, and they weren't done with it yet. What? 6 months later, Liora stood in a new warehouse, larger, better equipped, with 3 printing presses instead of 1. The walls were covered with maps, notes, lists of names. She wasn't hiding anymore. The pamphlets she printed now carried her name, Liora Hale, investigative writer. People knew who she was. Some hated her for it. Others loved her. Most just read her work and formed their own opinions. She was fine with that. Darian appeared in the doorway, carrying a stack of documents. "I found something." "What?" "Land deals in the southern districts. Suspicious contracts, shell companies." He set the documents on the table. "I think we have another Thorne." Liora moved to the table, scanning the papers. Her mind was already spinning, connecting threads, seeing the shape of the story. "Who is it?" she asked. "Councilwoman Marin. Elected last year. Clean record, popular, well-liked. Perfect cover." "Exactly." Liora looked up at him. "How deep does it go?" "Deep enough to matter." She nodded slowly. "Then we start digging." Darian leaned against the table, studying her. "You know this won't be easy." "It never is. And people will fight back. They always do. And you might lose." "I might," Liora agreed. "But I'm tired of letting people like Marin win just because they're good at hiding." Darian smiled. "So am I." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the next fight settling between them. Then Liora picked up a pen. "Let's get to work." The months that followed were hard. Councilwoman Marin was smarter than Thorne, more careful, better protected. The investigation took longer, required more sources, more risks. But Liora didn't stop. She wrote. She interviewed. She followed every lead, no matter how small. Darian provided resources, connections, protection when things got dangerous. And slowly, piece by piece, they built their case. When they finally published, the city erupted again. Marin denied everything, hired lawyers, threatened lawsuits, but the evidence was undeniable. The council launched an investigation. Marin resigned 3 weeks later. She wasn't arrested, not like Thorne. The charges were civil, not criminal. She lost her position, her reputation, but not her freedom. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And that was enough. A year after Thorne's arrest, Liora stood in the central square, watching a new statue being unveiled. It wasn't a statue of her, or Darian, or even Emmett. It was a statue of the printing press. The plaque read, "In honor of those who speak truth to power." Liora stared at it, her chest tight. "You did this," Darian said from beside her. "We did this," she corrected. "You started it. You made it possible." They stood side by side, watching the crowd gather around the statue. "Do you ever regret it?" Darian asked quietly. "The kiss, the pamphlets, all of it." Liora thought about that, about the danger, the fear, the sleepless nights, about her father, still working the press, still asking no questions, about the enemies she'd made and the allies she'd found. "No," she said finally, "I don't." "Good." She looked at him. "What about you?" Darian's expression was unreadable as always, but there was something softer there now, something almost like peace. "I don't regret it either," he said. Liora reached for his hand. He took it, and together they stood in the square, surrounded by people who didn't know their names, watching a city that was slowly, painfully learning to change. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't finished. But it was theirs, and that was enough. 5 years later, Liora published her first book. It wasn't a novel. It was a collection of her investigations, her essays, her fights. Ink and Iron. Stories from the press became a bestseller within months. People read it in universities, in taverns, in quiet rooms across the kingdom. It sparked debates, inspired movements, changed minds. Darian wrote the foreword. He kept it short, practical. Like him. Truth doesn't win because it's true. It wins because people refuse to let it die. Liora Hale is one of those people. Read her words, then decide what you're willing to fight for. Liora read it standing in the warehouse, tears in her eyes. "You didn't have to do that," she said. Darian shrugged. "I wanted to." "Why?" "Because you were right," he said simply, "about everything." Liora set the book down and moved toward him. He caught her hand, pulling her close. "We make a good team," she said. "We do." "Think we can keep it up?" Darian smiled. Rare, genuine, real. "I'm counting on it." And when he kissed her this time, it wasn't desperate or reckless or born from fear. It was a promise, a partnership, a choice they both made freely. And when they pulled apart, Liora looked at him and said, "What's next?" Darian laughed. "You really don't stop." "Never." "Good," he said, "because I found something in the northern provinces. Suspicious labor contracts, possible trafficking." Liora's expression sharpened. "How bad?" "Bad enough." She nodded. "Then let's go." They grabbed their coats, their bags, their notebooks, and they walked out into the city together, side by side, ready for whatever came next, because the fight wasn't over. It would never be over, but they weren't fighting alone anymore. And that made all the difference.